So is it 9 o'clock? Yes, it's 9 o'clock. Hello. Yes, you can see me from Tennessee, UK. Awesome. France, Indiana, Argentina. Wow. Cool. Savannah, Montreal. Cool. Ottawa, Georgia, Germany. Cool. Yay. And Japan. My goodness. My goodness. Quite a bunch of wonderful guests. So, good morning, everybody. Well, at least it's 9 o'clock for me, 9 o'clock in the morning here in California. I have a whole list of ephemera related questions to go through, and I typed them all out so that you can see them as well. I wanted to kind of have it very organized so that I knew from what topic to talk about next. Terrible. Goodness. Okay, what if I just go like this? There. Okay. All right, so here is our first question. What is your definition of ephemera? Asking because I've watched YouTube videos about creating ephemera, for example, tags and faux stamps. However, others define ephemera as original old items such as tickets and stamps. This question came from Michelle. So, yes, Michelle, absolutely. There are two things going on here. There is the traditional definition of ephemera, which is items of collectible memorabilia, typically written or printed, that were originally expected to have only a short-term purpose. So, examples of ephemera would be things like tickets. This was, I don't know, public transportation. Here's a train ticket. These things they were very important for a very short time when they were being used, but they no longer have any purpose. That is the true definition of ephemera. However, we have all kinds of paper scraps, some of them vintage, some are not. Here's more ephemera. Another bus ticket, this little thing that was on an envelope at some point, right? So there is a difference between paper vintage scraps and actual ephemera, but they all kind of get thrown into the same basket, right? So that's why there's a tiny little bit of disconnect with those definitions, but you get the idea. Move those out of the way. All right. Number 2. When you collect ephemera from books, do you keep the pages in the books until you have a project to work on? Deconstructed the book so ephemera is sorted and organized and ready to go. Pull a few pages from each book and have a stack of ephemera ready to use. I'm referring to pages used for backgrounds, music, text, handwriting, maps, foreign language, etc. I would find it helpful to see how you go about looking for ephemera in your art supplies to use on a specific project, coming from Michelle. All right, so first let's talk about ephemera from books. I do have a group of books, and where's my one example? A stack of books. Oh, I had to, don't know where I put it now, my Greg shorthand book. What I do is I keep the books in as much with the covers as possible because it's just easier to store a book with pages in it straight back into your bookshelf or where a stack of books rather than tear up pages and then have a big messy pile of pages. Here's one of my containers where I stick a lot of different pages in it. And I do keep, book pages, pieces of dictionary pages. Here's some Greg shorthand. So if you, I have, well, see, I have a designated space where I keep all my ephemera. And, well, not all of it, but good chunks of it. And here, for example, is some poetry that came from a book. I use this quite a lot, quite a lot. They're small, they're narrow. I kind of like this. This is a direction of a single piece. So I have used this quite a bit. And so I have it in here. But most of the time, I have a stack, not a stack, I have a group of about 10 books, and I keep them in my garage because I don't have room to keep them in my house. But those books are Latin, for example, more poems from Tennyson and mathematics and just a range of books that I will use for book pages, and I do keep them with the covers. Also, it comes to a point sometimes when I don't tear out anything from that book, and I want to give it away or do just not hold on to it any longer. And so it's better if I have not torn any pages out of it yet, so I can pass it on to somebody else. Do you know what I mean? So unless you know you're going to start using it, I would not tear it completely apart and just have stacks and stacks of papers. It's super easy to get overwhelmed with too much stuff anyway. So if you can have a couple of sheets or a handful of sheets from a bunch of books and then keep them in your things, that's fine. But then the rest, goes somewhere else. Only a few times that I'll take something completely apart and just stick it in with the rest of my papers. For the second part, I would find it helpful to see how you go about looking for ephemera in your art supplies to use on a specific project. I will get back to this. I will do something about this. I will demonstrate something like this. Let me look really quick and see if there's any comments. So a book is not considered short-term use. Does it say backgrounds? Well, I mean, short-term use. No, I think if you're making a commitment to tear out pages, you're not going to be using them all at once. So that's something that you do over long term, right? So I think that's what you mean, right? All right, so that's that. Next, where to find it, buy it. I feel printing off of the internet is cheating from Natasha. And also, where do you get your ephemera? Okay, this is a big question, and I have some examples for you. So, over the course of time, I created this list of where to find ordinary paper scraps. I put a link in the description of this video where you can download this for free if you want to print it out. And I like this kind of reminder of where to find scraps for modern day stuff, just creative use of scraps that you have. So we'll go through this, and then I will also show you some examples in some of my journals. Okay, so, and the other thing, the whole purpose of stuff from your daily life. Say that somebody tells you, I found a scrapbook journal that your grandma made 80 years ago, and it's super awesome. You're not going to believe what's inside. And you would be super excited, of course, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, what kinds of things would be in there? What kinds of paper scraps would be in there? So you would be expecting to see certain things from a time in your life, from a time in your grandma's life 80 years ago. And these would be, things, I don't know what they could be, imagine what they could be, just receipts from stores, things just from her everyday life. And now imagine 80 years from now, somebody finds a journal of yours and opens it up and they see scraps and things inside. What kinds of things could be in there? What kinds of things would you imagine that somebody might find interesting 80 years from now? So that's why I like to sometimes do things like this where it's just totally modern stuff, and then use them in creating your own glue books and journals and so on. So from your daily life, there's things like receipts. Receipts are not really that interesting, but you can do things to them, add color, whatever. Shopping, so grocery stores, retailers like, Target, Tesco, whatever. Hardware stores. I said hardware because this is where I get paint chips, and you know that I love to do collage with paint chips. And then thrift stores for, papers. So some examples, some of my glue books. So this is one of my eclectic page glue books. And here is something that I got, from the grocery store. This was a cracker box, and it's just done with a really nice, style. And then also this one too is coming from a jar of jam. So it's done just with a really nice, in a style that is kind of vintage, I guess, but it still really makes a nice collage. And this is also a very modern stamp, a stamp from Germany, right? So, and this is just modern pattern paper, just came from a paper pad. This is a sticker. Then I've got some sheet music down here, and this is vintage. I forgot what that exactly is, but it's just has got a very pretty, neat design. Okay, so those are some things from. Oh, here's a receipt. So the top part of a receipt, right? That's also interesting. Kids art. Hold on, all my examples here. My daughter does spin art, or she used to. And I saved a bunch of those that she created. And then afterwards, I created a collage using her spin art in there, right? So I took the colors, there's 3 colors there. And then I looked for paper pieces that would kind of reflect these colors. So I found it in a map. And then also I rubber stamped in a green color on a piece of paper, and then, also glued that there. So that's an example of using kids' art in a collage. Post office. All right. So many great things to be found in a post office. Here is a sheet of 1-cent stamps. So this is 4 times 5, so that's 20 cents. For 20 cents, you can get a whole sheet of Tiffany lamps. And these are great. They, of course, come right off. And what's cool about these, I don't have an example in here, but when you make a collage, if you take several of them and line them up one way, or up or to the side or down, the eye is just really drawn to things in a line or a pattern, right? So you can use these to make patterns in your collages. So that's one example of postage stamps. There's 1 cent, 2 cent, 5 cent, so you could get sheets of very low amounts and use them in your art. Work. This is open-ended. I mean, everybody has different jobs or things they do. So, if you keep your eye out for interesting things across your desk, well, who knows? Something might come along. Okay, and then print media, magazines. I get my free magazines from the library. Catalogs in the mail, solicited or unsolicited. Sometimes you get stuff randomly, and then other times you can actually go on a website and say, hey, can you send me your catalog, please? And they will do that. Book pages from used books, of course. So find out when your used book sales are in your neighborhood. Maps, instructions in appliances like IKEA products. If you've ever bought a lamp, for example, from IKEA, It comes with a little thing, a paper, and you fold it out, and it's got all these announcements or directions for assembling or whatever in different languages. And so you can see stuff in Bulgarian and Romanian and languages that you would not normally come across. And those are so cool. And the print is actually pretty tiny. So it's, and then you just fold it up and you stick it somewhere and you've got all, those languages. It's really cool. Food packaging, I kind of went over already. Boxes from other food packaging, tea bag envelopes, candy wrappers. All right, label stickers. This list, you can probably tell, I created for using with the assignments. If people are looking for stuff to use in their weekly assignments, this kind of helps with that. And then odds and ends, envelopes, old postage stamps, forms, stickers, art scraps, business cards, old Post-it notes, photos, wrapping paper, wallpaper, napkins with design, paper bags, and washi tape, right? So that is examples of where to find it, where to buy it. My suggestion would be to look on Etsy. So, for example, I got this on Etsy, and it was some time ago. So, I don't know if this seller sells them anymore, but you can find something similar. She just sold a stack of vintage papers, just like this, and on a ring. Did she actually? Yes, she did include the ring. They're all in neutrals, so they're quite plain. I don't know if you can find it useful or not useful, but there's lots of things like this that people sell online, and Etsy in particular, because it's kind of a marketplace for creatives, right? Creative people who create stuff, but then creative people who are looking for things that they can use in their art and so on. So Etsy is a good place. Also, eBay is more, well, yeah, eBay is kind of hit or miss for me. So I have better luck finding stuff on Etsy. All right. Where do I get my ephemera? So I get my ephemera from a bunch of different places, of course. I get them from antique malls. I don't go a lot, but when I do, I buy stuff. I'm in the mood to spend money on vintage things like postcards and letters and things like that. I get stuff at my local book sale. They have a section called Ephemera, as a matter of fact, where they sell just all kinds of things like maps and guidebooks and picture books and things like that. That's in Palo Alto. And then I get stuff. Where else do I get stuff? I do get things from Etsy from time to time. I got, for example, these postage stamps. I got 100 Queen Elizabeth stamps in all the colors, in a whole bunch of different colors. And this is so useful because, it's just a bunch of different colors. And when you need to add something and you want the right shade, this is so helpful to have. So that's what I got on Etsy. I also get things online for washi tape, of course, and I think that's about it. I think. All right. Oh, I wanted to show you before I get to the next question. I wanted to show you this junk journal. I think you've seen it. I have or you may have seen it. I have a video flip through of this one, so you can find it if you want to see it more detailed. But inside, I have just a bunch of. Let's see if I can raise it up a little. A bunch of papers that are more, from modern day stuff. So this is something from a magazine. Obviously, this is a candy candy bag, right? So this just comes from magazines. Sometimes I put paper in here from books, but not a whole lot. The big map. And then I just kind of glued punches. I had a bunch of punched, this is just from a paper pad, so I wanted to do something with them. Postcard. This came from a catalog where it was just a jewelry catalog, and it was really pretty, so I put it in there. Catalog paper or from magazines is super, super thin, so sometimes I use them and sometimes I don't. And if I do put stuff in, sometimes I'll reinforce it with washi tape before I actually sew it in. This is also very fine paper, right? So this is, again, from a travel magazine. You probably heard me talk about how I take stuff from travel magazines. This is just a drop paper, right? So you can get stuff, a lot of really cool papers from modern times, papers from now. And I just imagine that somebody has this in 80 years and then looks through it, right? What are they going to see? What's inside? What things do you find appealing? Right? This is an envelope. I really like that. This is cool, huh? Sometimes I just put washi tape at the edge. Here's more punches, punch out things. More ribbon. This is a lamp from a catalog. Just a pretty lamp, right? And it has a little bit of this peach color in it, so then I put a peach ribbon over here. Simple, simple, simple. And it doesn't take a whole lot of thought for me to do this. It's not even collaged with anything else. It's one single image on an interesting background, folded over with a piece of ribbon, right? Sometimes I did more collaging or not, right? So these books are super, super fun of just junk, just stuff. Leftover, here's more kids' art. Lots of color, right? Very cool. So this is just an example of what you can do with modern day scraps. Okay. Back to my questions. Okay, got that. Number 4, how do you make ephemera that doesn't require a sewing machine? And what types of paper work best for ephemera? Okay, so now we are talking about making reproductions of ephemera. This is a big thing. A lot of people do this on YouTube. They create stuff. This person, Robin, is asking how you do it that doesn't require a sewing machine, and then what types of paper work best. Okay, so I don't use a sewing machine that much. I had one project recently where I was invited to collaborate and do something with the sewing machine. And so I pulled my sewing machine out. It's super heavy, and it's not so easy to use. So I try to avoid using a sewing machine. So you will rarely see sewing in my journals and glue books and so on. So how do you create it without a sewing machine? And that's, I also have some examples of papers. The other second question was what papers to use. I created a video earlier this year. I think it's called 3 Ways to Find Vintage Papers. 3 ways to find vintage papers, I think. I will put the link below. And there I gave some demonstrations of how to create vintage ephemera, create reproductions of ephemera. And one of the things that I mentioned was it's great if you can start from a source that already looks vintage. And in this case, this came from the beginning of a book. And so the paper is it's old. It's an old book and it's very fragile. And this is the perfect thing to use for creating some reproduction ephemera. Another example I have is this tea bag. It's an ordinary, black tea, and I opened it up very carefully, removed the staple, and then dried it out. And now when I stamp something on it, it has this very thin, delicate texture, right? So in the case of this one, say I have a rubber stamp like this, and I'm going to ink it. Oh gosh, it's dirty. Maybe I need to practice. I want to stamp it somewhere else first. Okay. Now I will put this down here. Come on, camera. Let's see if I do it this way. No, it doesn't want to focus for me. Okay, well, you get the idea. It looks really good. It looks really nice. And the great thing about inks is that you can pick whatever color you want, right? Let's try red. Let's try red and see how that goes. Nice, very nice. So these are already two things that I would definitely use in creating some art. I do definitely like torn rather than cut. That's just a personal preference of my own, but you could do however you like. There we go. And this one. So rubber stamping is a great thing to do for how you create your own, and use an old paper. Okay. This, I don't know what this is. It's almost like a deli paper. It has a shiny side on this side, and then it has a matte side. So, use whichever side you want, but it's super thin. And the second person, Marty Starnes, asked what type of paper works best for ephemera. I prefer thin. The thinner, the better. The thinner, the better, because once you start creating this, it gets really, really, large. Can you guys hear me okay? Everything okay? I got my telephone was vibrating and I'm not sure, okay, everything's fine. Okay. So yeah, the thinner the better, because I really don't like when my books get so fat that they don't fit nicely in the bookshelf anymore. So, and sometimes even if I have something like chipboard, and I rarely use chipboard, but if I do, and I don't know if I have an example in here. If I have something that's chipboard, I will literally try and split it apart. I will work at it and remove some of the layers so that it comes like this. Okay, I get rid of this, of course, and now I have a much thinner, usable piece of paper that I can collage with, right? All right, that is everything I want to say about paper, I think. Paper. That's my 3 examples. I'll clean up my space so that I can move on to the next question. I will save these little roses. Okay. Next question. How do you make a cohesive cluster? Denise. Right. So this is another thing that's pretty popular on YouTube, making clusters. So how do we make a cluster? So let's get out some samples. These are some of my paper scraps. This is the smallest size that I have. Here's an example of a cluster someone sent to me, and it consists of 3 pieces. It consists of text in a foreign language at the back. There is map down here. And then there is an image of some birds on the top. So there's 3 pieces. And what's also interesting about this is just how it goes off, to the side, to the 2 sides. I like it when there's like pieces that stick out in a weird direction. So, that's interesting visually for me. So let's stick with 3. 3 is kind of the magic number for me. Okay. So if I go with 3, let's take out a bunch of things here, just random small bits. I always have postage stamps lying around. There's a cigar label. Okay. So I would like something, I'll start with a bigger one and then go with something like this. Now I've got 2. So now I want to add a 3rd, right? So I could add something like this. See? It's just 3 things. And the cool thing is the shape. This comes out this way. This comes out this way. That is what's interesting to me. Now I could go ahead and add a 4th if I want, but with 3, I think that's plenty. That's actually too much, I think. 4 is too many. So let's stick with 3. Let's do another one. Background piece. This is interesting. This is just a pattern from the inside of a envelope, right? And these are so fun to make if you just have these little scissors. Set aside your envelopes and then just create a bunch of shapes. I like rectangles or squares that you can use for making collage. This one definitely I would use it with a stamp because it kind of reminds you of an envelope because that's a pattern from an envelope. So then I would do something like this. Okay. So that's a cluster there. Let's see if we can do something with this round one. I'm not sure if those colors go. No, that's too plain. Maybe I'll stick with the green. I don't think it matters which way that goes. And let's see, what can we do for the third one? Something like that, maybe. In this case, I might do a little rubber stamping here just because there's a whole bunch of blank space. But what's cool is that you've got a kind of a round shape and a round shape. That works for me. Right. Here's one that somebody did for me. There's this cute little envelope. And it has a piece of washi tape, rubber stamping, and then the third thing is a stamp that connects these two pieces, pulls it together. And the washi tape has blue, and the rubber or the postage stamp has got this blue around the edge as well, right? So these are all really nice examples of clusters, right? Okay. Catherine says, it seems that what I think looks interesting is apparently displeasing to most others. Well, it depends. Who are the others? If you're talking about people like, I don't know, your relatives or whatever, who probably could care less about what you're doing, versus a group of friends or in an environment where you're doing art, then they will care and be very excited about what you're creating. So that I guess it all depends on the environment. All right, so let me put these away. Tell us where these cluster police are. Sounds scary. Okay. Right. Next question. Is it always okay to scan and print original ephemera? Would you use original ephemera over a copy? Depending on what I'm making, I hesitate to use the original and to make copies. Um, Bottom line is that it's up to you, of course. Originals versus copies. I mostly use originals, or at least I try to. However, with the exception of family things, family photos, family records, family documents, a lot of those things I don't use originals for because I just don't know, I guess I'm preserving the originals for my descendants. So I keep those, separate. I will scan them, possibly sometimes use some of the photos, but not the originals. But I do use originals of other photographs that I find in antique stores or secondhand stores, and I'll show you some examples. So I was at an antique mall in Tucson, Arizona, and they had this bin full of photos, old vintage photos. I got some, including this one of Elizabeth Taylor. And I think it looks like it's some kind of casting thing because this is the information about the movie. I don't even know what movie that is. The Art of Susan, or I don't know what it is. But anyway, there were these photos of Elizabeth Taylor, and I could have scanned them and then just used copies, but I wanted to use the original. And it's just an aesthetic of using vintage paper in my work. This is also original photo of, looks like World War II soldiers walking down a street. And this is an original Player's Cigarette trade card and on an original envelope. So I look for originals and I look to actively use them in my art. It's a choice that I make. And would I, for example, with this Elizabeth Taylor, could I have copied and used the image again and again and again? Of course I could have, but I know it's in this book and I don't think I would want to use it anywhere else. This is the only place that I have this photo. It's a one-of-a-kind photo and it's in this book, and that's it. Here's another photo. You know, things like postcards, you know, of course I'd like to use vintage. Now, some people it's hard to come across old photos or things that are vintage that you can use. So it's about how you could get a hold of things. And for some people it's much more difficult, right? So in that case, if you get something online, then absolutely use it because that's what you have available to you. That's the bottom line for me, right? Here's a piece of vintage wallpaper. I could have copied that and just use a scan of it, but it's one of a kind and I wanted to, you know, include it. This is a copy of a postcard and it's just pretty. And I printed it on a very thin copy paper. Oh, and did I answer that question about the person who asked about what kind of paper should you be using? I, again, prefer the thinner the better. And if that's just ordinary copy paper, then great. Right? And so it just works. So that is what I would say about scanning ephemera. Okay. Oh, did I want to show you one more book? This one. This one contains all, oh no, come on. Come on, camera. Let's try again. Why does it do that? How do I get it to focus? Oh, maybe go back to, oh, there we go. Okay. Yes, there we go. So this one contains all vintage papers. And I made an effort in this book. I told myself that I would not add any papers that were reproductions. I wanted to challenge myself and create collages only with vintage papers. So I have about, I don't know, 10, 12 pages in here. I haven't done that many because it's sometimes hard to find really interesting, you know, vintage papers. So yeah, this is a book that I've been working on for years, and that's okay. It's sometimes I like it, or I do like it actually, when I'm able to return to projects after a long period of time and keep on working on them for long periods of time. They're like old friends, right? When you come back and you revisit them after a long while. So I love, you know, just how dirty this is and torn and, you know, bits and pieces. So I couldn't get this with reproductions, right? It's just part of the whole thing. Catherine says, so it's okay if my style doesn't match or look anything like anyone else's. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And actually, I mean, that's kind of what you want, right? Or at least be happy with your style, that it looks different than other people's. Okay. Next. Do you use printables? If so, which are your favorites? Kim. All right, I do use some printables sometimes, and I use them for different purposes. So I used to make a lot of junk journals in the past, and I have some kits from Ephemera's Vintage Garden. She is still one of my favorites for creating junk journals with her printables. So that's Ephemera's Vintage Garden. Debbie Ann Parent is the artist who makes these. She just does a really outstanding job, I think, for these types of printables. She makes journal page ones, of course, but she also makes small ones, small little things to add into the journals. I had them the right direction before, and then I turned it around. Right. So this is Ephemera's Vintage Garden. And then there's also things like this. Sometimes I'll get, if I printed on really nice thin paper, cut them out and then use them in layers, of course. I don't remember where this came from. But for this journal, this red one, I did this little junk journal. I wanted to create a journal where I could put lace. So there, in my area, there is a lace museum, and the ladies in there, they just have pieces of lace that they sometimes sell. And what's really cool is that they tell you about it, what kind of lace it is, and will give you all kinds of, history lessons about the lace. And so I didn't have time to create like all the pages inside how I wanted it to look. And so with a digital printable, I was able to find something to give it the look that I wanted. And then, use it as a place to write some notes about the different types of lace. And then, of course, I added my own vintage pieces in here. But even, something in like a modern printable can go with the aesthetic of something vintage, right? So this is a piece of paper, book page. And then, yeah, just added all kinds of little things and descriptions of the lace, right? But then she had these pieces that I also cut out and used them in this little junk journal. This one too, and this one, right? So I do use printables sometimes, depending on my purpose. Okay. So yeah, and this book cover, this was a Tim Holtz something or other. It had two eyelets here, that if you want to put a signature in. So, and then I used, this is also Tim Holtz, the very thin paper, tissue paper. And I used, the background was this brown with a square printable. And then I covered it with that paper. So that's how I made that. And then just added some little lace bits to it. All right, so now, what are your most used ephemera? What are your most used ephemera by type? I actually found it simpler to collage when I had fewer categories of ephemera. Background papers, few cutouts, etc. What are the most useful types of ephemera when you don't want too much choice? Yeah, too much choice is, it's just overwhelming when you just have too many things to choose from. So what types are good? I like neutrals, so I do keep different kinds of pages, book pages that are neutral in color. I like things with lines, so stuff with ledgers, ledger papers, things of that sort. Also, receipts have lines, forms have lines, so that's something else that I look for. These are a bunch of neutrals. I like things with pops of color, so stuff like cigar labels, and then I have some small tickets. Those are also helpful. And I just keep them in a little bundle like that. Map is always useful. Smaller things like tags. And is there anything? Oh, and postcards. Postcards. Those are really big for me also. Postcards are great because, keep another little drawer here. Postcards are great because I can tear them apart sometimes. Sometimes I tear them. Sometimes I keep them whole, right? And then you have an option of, depending on what's on the back side, you might use what's on the back rather than what's on the front. So I would definitely invest in some vintage postcards. And those, they are not hard to find. Postcards are not hard to find. You can get them on Etsy. You can get them on eBay. I belong to my local stamp club. There are postcard clubs. Yeah, I mean, look at this one, for example. This one you could tear. See the front. Well, this is pretty nice too. Maryland. But if this was unattractive or not interesting, I should say, you could cut this in half. Just tear it right down the middle, and you would have something interesting on this side and something different on the other. Having a fine time. Stopped here for a few minutes. Mrs. Evans to Miss Nancy Current. Nice, right? So there's another one. This one also has a stamp on it. Oh, California poppies. Yep. That's beautiful. That one I would probably just use as is. Or in this, what I could also do is put it in here and see how I did it with this one. This is a postcard, and I cut it in half, and I very, deliberately put it on two sides and left a tiny bit of space so that I can close the book and it's not going to ruin the hinge, right? So this is a way that you can use postcards like this on 2 pages. So, and then the other thing is postage stamps. That's the other kind of pieces that I use in my collage art all the time. Again, you can find postage stamps at your local stamp club. They are overwhelmed with too many stamps. So they will be happy to, however, depending on how much you want, $10 worth, $20 worth, they will send you a bag or a pound or whatever of postage stamps. So that's also an option as well. Okay. Put this back. This back in here. Okay. 9. What kind of glue? What kind of glue do you use on very fine, fragile papers? And is there a way to treat or seal old paper to keep it from cracking when it's folded? Okay, glue. Where is my glue? I had, well, let's see. For me, my number one choice is glue stick, even for fragile papers. Why? Because it is you have the most control. You have the ability with a glue stick to be able to put it on, to put your paper or to use it with even fine papers. The thing though is with not all glue sticks are the same. Some glue sticks are extremely tacky. If you start to use your glue and it's not going on nicely, it's too dry, it's old. Maybe if you open up a fresh glue stick, it'll be more moist. And then therefore, if you have very fragile paper, it's not going to tear it or pull it, right? How would I put it on? I would be pretty aggressive in the middle, pretty heavy. And then as I get towards the edges, just kind of firmly, but not as strongly, around the edges so that it doesn't tear. Some people like to use matte medium, I guess liquid glues with paintbrushes. I have some. I have Yes paste, and it dries super nice, very flat, no bubbles, no wrinkles. It's just hard to use, and hard to use in the respect that with paintbrushes, then I need a little bit of water, and then I need the brush, and then I use the brush, and then I'm worried that the paint or the glue is going to glue all my bristles together. It's just a lot of fuss. And so I try to avoid at all costs using liquid glues. Some people love it. They just have a system, and they're happy using liquid glues. If that's you, then do it. Use what you have. That's the bottom line. Use what you have and what works. Glue sticks, I have one recommendation for a glue stick. It's called Yamato, Yamato. It's a Japanese company who makes glue sticks. You can buy them on Amazon. They make beautiful glue sticks. Of course, they're a little bit pricier, but they glide. They just glide. And that type of glue stick I would use for very delicate work, because you have control. It's in a small something you can hold in your hand, and it just goes on nicely. And it dries flat. It does not bubble. It does not bend when it dries. So Yamato, Yamato. Is there a way to treat or seal old paper to keep it from cracking when folded? So I just showed you an example of pages in here in this book. I split some of my old pieces because they're fragile, right? So I kept that in mind. And when I was putting pages in here, I used washi tape on the spine first. Or is it a spine? Not spine. At the margin. I purchased a washi tape that was kind of clear or just a little bit of a beige color, ivory color, so you don't really see it. This here, it almost looks like carpenter's tape, like something that you can just get from the hardware store. It's a little bit yellowish. This also works. And again, you can just see that I split the papers very deliberately because I wanted my book to close nicely, right? If you can't avoid that, if you have a piece of paper and it's going to bend, what would you do? Would I seal it? No, I would not. Once you seal old paper, it totally changes. It totally changes the texture, the look, the feel, and it just alters it in such a way that you lose that sense of the original paper that it was. So I don't seal. I just don't. But again, that's just a choice that I make. I don't seal pretty much in anything. But if you were going to preserve it, if you need it preserved, then yes, I might look for some kind of varnish or some kind of sealant. Stay away from something like Mod Podge. That's not good. But there's probably, you would have to do, search online and see what you could find that would be a really good sealant, right? Here I just used regular Tim Holtz washi tape. Oh, I probably should not have done that. I'm trying to keep my whole vintage vibe here, and then I see this washi tape. But I used it just to reinforce the pages because they were starting to split a little bit. I don't even think I can add any more in here, unfortunately. I have a lot of pages, but the book is already getting full. So I probably won't add any more. Okay, so we're getting close to the end, My last questions. This one, how and where to sell it, Cheryl. This is an easy one. I would say Etsy. Look on Etsy, see what other people are selling, see how many pieces they're selling, for what amount. You could just learn a lot by looking at what other people are doing. How do you look for different sizes? Well, when I have my boxes, I kind of have my sizes this way, right? I kind of keep them nested. So I know what sizes I need. If I'm looking for something that's bigger, then I go to a box that has bigger pieces. And then also, you can always take something and cut it down, right? I could take this and tear it and have a smaller size depending on the project that I need. So and then if I'm looking for something, if I'm at an antique store, I can always keep in mind, oh, hey, don't forget, you need to look and see if you can keep an eye for smaller things, because that's important too. For small stuff, there's always postage stamps, which are, of course, small. And then you can always make things that are small too. I think that is everything. Wait, I wanted to say, oh yeah. So the one thing that I have not talked about, let me find my little paper, my last paper in the ephemera. Oh, is it too many papers? I got confused now. Well, I can't find it. But anyway, the last thing I wanted to talk about was how to store your ephemera. So let me move my camera back. We're going to finish for today. But I will turn my camera back and you can see my outside. That's what my yard looks like right now. No snow where I am in California. Good. Yes, you can see me okay. How to store ephemera. So I was thinking hard about this question because a lot of people ask, how do you store your ephemera? I am in my office. Well, it's actually where my husband works, and where I record, but this is not where I create art. This is not where I create. So I was like, oh, okay, I just need to show you. I need to show you what I do, how I store, and give you some ideas of how to, what to do with your ephemera. So I am going to take my camera and take you into my work area, which happens to be my laundry room. It's not very attractive. That's why I never record over there. But I will just set up the camera on the tripod and show you. Just pull out stuff and show you how I store and how I just have my ephemera at hand so that I can find it. I will have to do that separately at a different time, so not today. So look for that in the next couple of days. That will be the next project I'm working on. I promise. The next thing I work on to show you. And then the other thing was the other person had asked, what question was that? Number 2. How do you look for different sizes? Oh, come on. How do you go about selecting what you're going to use for a given collage? That is another question that requires a demonstration. So I will show you how I stir collage, and then I will show you how I pick papers to create a collage. So let me check if there's any other last questions. Organization, yes. You will see my creating space, absolutely. And good. All right. Cool. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you got some ideas, new things to do. Don't forget to get that printable if it's something that you're interested in, just sticking it on a wall and reminding yourself, hey, I'm out today at the post office. I'm going to get some 20 cents of 1 cent stamps. That's very helpful. All right. So have a good rest of your day, and I will see you shortly with a tour of my workspace. Bye.